The story that you have about your life is the most important story you'll ever hear. As a matter of fact, the most powerful story in the world is the one you're telling yourself right now, because it's defining your future. And we're talking here in this Take 10 moment about unlocking your story, because we believe that you have been given the power to co-author with God new chapters that actually fulfill His blueprint for your life and take you up a higher level. So, Carl, we bring us up to date on what we did so far, and let's talk about their personal destiny map and what we've got for them in the material.
Sure. Before I jump into that, I'm going to walk over to the board over here and show you kind of where we started and ended on the last segment. What we have over here is the life story of Joseph. And it starts out with favor from his dad. He gets the multicolored coat, and his brothers have a lot of jealousy, and so they throw him in the pit. After the pit, he ends up being rescued. That's fabulous, and unfortunately sold into slavery. He ends up getting purchased by Potiphar, and then there's a sex scandal with Potiphar's wife. Boom, arrested. He goes into prison. In the prison, he ends up interpreting a dream for was it a chef or a butler? A cupbearer. Okay. Like a bottle service, I guess, for those of you who are younger. And he ends up interpreting the dream, but he ends up being forgotten by his new friend, his cupbearer friend. The king has a dream. The cupbearer remembers his good friend Joseph, gets him to come out of the cell, and then boom, he ends up going back into the good graces, or at least what he would consider to be a positive experience in his own life. And as you can see, all of this ends up forming into the crown of life. So what I would like to do, if I may, is do a bit of a dotted line through here. So this is going to be the midline for the average person. It doesn't. Oh yeah, we also have a graphic up there. Great. The midline is kind of like the plus or minus 1, doesn't really have a strong impact emotionally on you one way or the other. And then the top ones are going to be closer to, we'll say, a 10 for ease of access, and the bottom ones will be a 2, again, because it's not quite a 0, but it's definitely not as good as a 5 or a midline. And what we see happening with all these different high points are these micro convergence moments. And what that means is convergence, as studied by Dr. Bobby Clinton, is when your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your natural proclivities, and the things that you have interest in all coincide and converge together for this phase and stage of life that not many people get to enter into. According to Dr. Bobby Clinton's study, about 20% of Christians through Fuller Theological Seminary, where he studied, enter into convergence. So that's 1 in 5. It's a little daunting, but it's definitely possible, especially if you stick to your guns and know what the process is. There's sovereign foundation, there's spiritual formation, there's ministry and life maturation, and after all of those things come together, it's around 60 years old?
Around 50 in the West.
Oh, 50 in the West. Hey, all right, young guns. But what we do is we see these micro-convergence moments that kind of speak to what Joseph's actual convergence at the tail end of his life is going to be. And we use this as an example. Inside of the material, we provide you with a couple of blank ones inside of the workbook itself. And we also have this really cool fold-out poster right here that you'll also be getting inside of the folders for unlocking your story. So when you go through it, note what your self-talk is, note what your perceptions are, and really challenge yourself to note whether or not it's a fact of what happened to you or a fictitious narrative that you're trying to spin for yourself. I believe it was Henry Ford who said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And what that symbolizes here is a lot of the narrative that drives our decisions, as we mentioned earlier in the belief pyramid, right? Your experience inform your beliefs inform your decisions, and your decisions inform your results. So what beliefs are driving the actions that are either going to lead to your high points, your micro-convergence moments, or your low points? And what happens in the low might affect the way that you interact in the next opportunity that comes your way.
And I think that's really an important point. The way that you exit a trial or a challenge is the way that you enter the next chapter, which is why it's so critical that you exit situations in a healthy way, where instead of trying to, and this is the evidence that you're in danger, instead of coming up with a victim scenario and you leave as a victim, you really need to leave the field of battle with complete objective understanding of what happened and what you can learn from what happened so that you could be aware of how this could happen in the future. Because in Joseph's case, it becomes a pattern. So let me go up to the board and show them what this will look like for them.
Excellent.
We've got the Joseph story here. It doesn't always work out that these graphs are as tidy as we'd like them to be. You could have, it's not quite always the easy up and down situation. But what we have up here is like, the high point, the low point, then we have the middle over here. And what I want you to catch is in a life that if you go through a timeline, you could see, I would say let's take your life and start the first time you do it, just do your whole life journey and cover your high points and your low points. And if you really get sophisticated in this, you could do this on your overall spiritual life, but you might actually have a graph that has to do with your career.
Yep.
Or your love life. And you'll find these things actually overlap in different directions. In other words, you could have had a great period of time in a career and a terrible time in a relationship, which is why sometimes I like to see people do more than one graph. So you do it on the overall life, and then you might do the relationship journey, because it might be that has a whole different period of realization for you. But each time you do it, here's what you're looking for. The high points up here are revealing a pattern, and the pattern that are the positive moments of your life are shaping your identity in terms of what you're able to do, what you're capable of doing. They're probably positive experiences if you put them up on that end of the graph, right? Down here, the negative experiences, as Carl's always quick to tell me, isn't always bad. Because the negative experiences sometimes is defining things for you, finding out what you're not really called to do, or finding out life lessons about people, or finding out life lessons about life itself. The major thing we want to focus on is your convergence pattern is up at the top, and you get to see what your gifts, talents, abilities, passions, and best moments are that have shaped your identity so far. But the real question is, what are your beliefs? We call them oogle boogles. What are the beliefs? Because if the beliefs you form in the low points here aren't really worked through the filter of truth, then you might actually be engaged in what we call ungodly beliefs. You can't trust anybody. This is what happens when you open your life up to other people. Or no matter what I have, it's always going to get taken from me. Or never enjoy the moment too much because it'll get taken away. Trust me, those proverbs and axioms float around in people unconsciously. Mm-hmm. The point is, you want to look at these areas here because this is your constraint pattern. By the way, a constraint is a behavior wedded to a belief. So somehow these elements down here at the bottom of your graph are more important than here, because oddly enough, your talents, gifts, and abilities will make room for you, the Bible says. But you have to actually identify the constraints, because the balloon will only go to the height that the weights will allow it to go. And in our research, getting to understanding the truth about your journey and the beliefs that you formed agreements with is the major renewing of the mind task, so that you'll find that the balloon automatically wants to go here. What holds it down is the constraints. Put the two together, and you'll find that the low points actually enriched you, gave you the pain and suffering, helped to provide passion. Passion to a great degree is the elixir of pain and purpose welded together. They come together in a beautiful way to create convergence. We're going to talk more about your story and how you could rewrite it in the next Take 10. I want you to know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. we do this whole business I'm in because of you. And it's been that way for almost 40 years now. You know, in this studio, I do a lot of news analysis. That seems to be the area that I'm called into right now, giving a Christian perspective on the world around you. Just yesterday, I remember the Lord saying something, reminding me about a conversation that takes place in the Bible where Peter, after the resurrection, is getting an update on what he's called to do. And he turns and sees John and he says, well, what about him? And the Lord says, basically, it's none of your business about him. If I decide that he should be here until I come back, what is that to you? You follow me. Now that's an interesting statement because it means that what difference does it make to you? What happens with the next election or with China or the United States? Your job is to follow me. It's with that thought in mind that I put together something called your ultimate life strategy. But I wanted to put my arms around the macro issues that make the biggest difference in fulfilling the call that God has in your life, you following him. And the only way you could do that for me is to have my wife with me, because there's something about the dynamic of the two of us that makes a more complete picture. And so together we did some Bible studies, some training, some teaching, and I just want to give it to you as a gift. I want you to get the ultimate life strategy, and it starts with doing a wheel analysis, not a real analysis, but a wheel analysis, looking at your relationships, looking at your finances in the coming times in the United States, looking at your health, your physical capacity, just an analysis of the assets that God gave you that you are stewarding, and then how do they work together in completing the call of God. So I want you to get this at lancewallnau.com/wheel. My gift to you, lancewallnau.com/wheel, and watch this free training on your ultimate life strategy.